And we are back for TDA Unchained. This is the third time of our private outing for paid subscribers. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in and watching. Of course, supporting the Daily Australian as we go. And this is the little addition, if you will, that we put together for you, where we get to talk off camera, supposedly, well, at least off show, on camera, about all sorts of matters concerning us and you, and a little bit about us, ourselves in general. So, Nicola, tell you what a week of news it's been. How are you feeling overall? I know we're going to feel different about this, but how are you feeling after the week that's just been?
Well, welcome to the post-production smoko. That's I actually get some good mail about people going, it's so cute how you smoke your cigarette on Unchained. Just gotta, after going through the show, I feel like a little bit, excuse me, I feel a little bit dirty because we've spoken about Epstein so much, obviously got my own history there. But I just feel like we're not governed or surrounded by, because this was a person, Epstein. If you forget about all the horrible stuff we know about him, when he was flying high, living in a brownstone in New York, living the high life at all the right parties. I referenced that the other day with all the models and the actresses, and could flick his fingers. And unfortunately, there's a lot of girls. There is a lot of girls and women out there who will go anywhere with anyone if they think they're rich and they've got money or influence. This was a guy who was living high on the hog. Whatever has happened to him at the end of his life, middle age and onwards, the best years of his life, he lived, very much like the royals lived. That's why the royals socialized with him. And there are people out there now, politicians included, and they're living high on the hog. They're never going to pay for any of their crimes. We're never going to know the truth about what they're up to. But, we jaywalk down in the village and we'll get a ticket. You know what I mean? It's just bizarre to me. I feel filthy dirty. I feel disappointed. I lived in America for 7 years, and I really like American people. And the thought that they've been constantly used or lied to, propagandized, is heartbreaking to me. And of course, it's no better in Australia. I would hazard a guess right now. Don't you think it's worse in Australia right now than in America?
It is so bad in Australia because we don't have a resistance. Our opposition is part of the Labor Party. That's why they can't get any traction. That's why they keep losing to an incompetent government. That's how bad it is. And it's the same elsewhere.
Know. I said yesterday in my little clip subversion, the Liberals know that Labor are importing voters. The Liberals know that. They know that when they stand there and they talk about building houses because of the crisis that was man-made, they know that what Labour are actually doing is importing voters, and they've stated they support them on it. So why would the Liberal Party support Labour importing voters, which works against them? It's just blatant proof that they're a uni party.
And the same can be seen in Canada, where you had Pierre Poilievre, that was a certain winner out early from the election, and then gets defeated and even loses his own seat because he wanted to stay away from the threat of the Trump thing. So that proves to you that Trump is the outlier, and that these go-along-to-get-along politicians have convinced themselves that they're just going to ride the time out before they go back to business as usual. But you couldn't be any weaker if you tried. I mean, the AUKUS deal, which we didn't talk about on the news today, is under review, and the idea is that the expectation is that Australia's going to have to put their hand in their pocket a little bit more and to commit to sending submarines over in support if there's ever a mission in Taiwan to defend Taiwan from China, to which Australia has now, got to make a commitment there.
Well, that makes sense in the region. That makes more sense than us sending troops to Ukraine, to me.
Well, this is it, right? So if Albanese set the precedent by sending people over to Ukraine, then he's got to send people over for Taiwan, if that's how his allegiance lies. But now we've got a real problem that this man is compromised because he's a CCP sympathiser, as is Daniel Andrews. So how does he then do all this sucking up to China, and how does Andrews, who let the Belt and Road in, then have to say, well, Andrews is sort of separate, but he's not, and then go and say, actually, we're supporting America against you guys. I'm literally playing both sides of the fence here. So are they up to that? Are they capable of doing that, or are they always going to deflect and deflect and deflect, which is what general politicians do, is that they never front up? That's an interesting component to this discussion.
Well, the only thing that makes sense is that there isn't two sides. It is that you don't have to choose between America and China. Maybe China's America's bitch. China was very quiet considering it aligned with Iran and Russia on the BRICS, right? It was very quiet
Mm,
about bombing Iran. It didn't stick up for his mate, didn't stand up to Trump. I think a comment came out that we'd like the bombing to stop, but China don't rumble. China don't go into the wrestling match with America very much. They just shut up because all China cares about is the economic stuff. So
mm.
they're not going to upset America when they're exporting all their crap furniture and goods over there. So I don't think there is an America and China. And I think Australia is choosing China not for as like a military side. I think they want America's military protection because something people ask me on this show when they message us is, well, if Albo is saying that he wants to not continue this historic partnership with America, are they going to close Pine Gap? Do you know much about that, Jason?
There's no way they'll be closing Pine Gap. Pine Gap's not even controlled by Australia at that point. Kim Beazley asked to go in there when he was defence minister, and he wasn't even allowed in.
What?
So that is just something that's kind of off limits at that point. Pine Gap, a lot of secrets, obviously. By the way, there was a really terrific TV series about Pine Gap, set in Pine Gap, that if anyone gets to have a look at, it's well worth looking at. Maybe 6 episodes or something like that on maybe one of the streaming platforms. I think it was actually called Pine Gap, if you want to look it up. But it's just interesting, fascinating that you get a sort of a look
Doco or
at
drama?
it. No, drama. So, I think 6 episode miniseries, something like that. It was pretty cool. I saw it a couple of years ago. The big thing for me this week was was when I interviewed John Eastman, the Trump lawyer, and so many things that he talked about. But the thing that really got to me not only was how brilliantly he explained birthright citizenship and allegiance, but it was not only that, but to just the overall feeling of how he described what was going on, and in particular how we are governed and how we are ruled as subjects of the king. And what he says is the entire thing, the argument there, what they're trying to do in the US is to create self-government, so govern ourselves. And what we've happened to have been over the last 5 years, and this is why he said Trump won so resoundingly in 2024, was that the COVID era showed people what it was like and they rejected it. And so here in Australia, we haven't yet rejected it. We still want to be governed, but really instructed or ruled. And that's what George Christensen talked about. He says government is not there to instruct us. They're there to represent us, and lies a difference. But what I liked about what John Eastman said was the concept of governing ourselves. And that is entirely where I stand, which is why you and I both at separate times have stood up as candidates, because we believe that we can hold the government, the system, to account, and we want to run our own lives. And so you now understand why there is a dumbing down, why there is a system of credentialism that excludes those that want to get in that they don't think fit part of the scene, and why we're called conspiracy theorists when we present facts that upset the narrative. They're all ways of derogatory terms to discredit us. And they even tried to do it to John Eastman, and that is exactly what he explained in his film, The Eastman Dilemma, by explaining that what they're trying to do is to discredit him at any level so that they will not consider anything that comes out of his mouth. He called it himself in real time. And I said, how can a constitutional professor who has served the Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, who has represented 200 people in the Supreme Court, lose his credentials all because he questions something that he knows? So then what I asked him was, do you regret anything, and would you change anything what you know now? Now, there's your get out point, right? And you know what he said? I wouldn't change a thing. I'd go harder. And I go, there's my guy. What a terrific human being. That's instead of going the other way and backing out, no, that's when you know that there is a war. And if people are willing to do that, he even said, look, I'm in my 60s now. I said, they take away my law license. So what? I retire at that point. But I'd only go harder. And I just thought that is the type of leader that we are missing today in this world. These are the real people that we are looking for and looking up to, who are willing and able to take on the system, deal with the consequences, and fight their way out. I can imagine he's not too worried, because even if he's convicted at some point, you would have to think that President Trump will pardon him before his term in office is up. So I guess there's a little bit of that, but there is still an arm's length relationship there. But there's just so much that we're sort of understanding that we're building a resistance in ways that we don't fully understand yet, but there are ways in which we're going to fight off this system. And the other thing that really bugs me is just how weak these people are. When you look at Albanese, you look at like almost a Mr. Bean type of character. He's so flimsy and rubbery and pathetic and spineless and invertebrate. He doesn't impress at any level. He even speaks like a rubber man. You look at Penny Wong and that miserable mono sounding tone.
Like a newsreader.
If like an ABC newsreader from 1975.
Yeah.
There's just nothing there.
That's what she studied. That's what she studied, to talk like that. Australia is a self-governing colony, Jason. And I'll tell you what, there's
self-governed. We're not self-governed.
No,
we're not self-governed.
There's no way they were going to let me get to the Senate or you to get to the lower house. There's no way, because we have too much logic, and we'd hold a mirror up to these people. And that's all I wanted to do, would to be that voice, because you're always on camera. That's why I wanted to get to the Senate. And you've got your name plaque underneath, and they have to air it. They have to air what you've said. They have to air your questioning and your holding up of that mirror. So we were never going to get there. It doesn't matter what party. You know, I was invited into the Liberal Party, but only if I would oversee in local government, only if I would oversee the implementation of a 15-minute city in Frankston. So that, and someone said to me afterwards, I think it was Rod Cullerton that said it to me, that he said, that's to take you off the battlefield. Right? Because once you're being paid off with your big salary, that's you gone. That's you taken care of. These people are like gangsters. That's what they do. They put people into positions. Someone mentioned to me the other day, you mentioned in the show Brad Batten, right? Someone in politics, I won't say who, said to me the other day, I think Jacinta Allen is she's on a very high wage. I think she's on the high 500s, 500,000 plus a year, right? Brad Batten is apparently on 480,000 a year, not far behind, right? And the guy really does nothing. He does like some social media. And so they said, why, you know, with regard to it being a uniparty, why would he want all of the headaches of being Jacinta Allen, being an elected state premier, when for just under that salary, he can do not much and say, I'm in opposition? It's just theatre. It's just a movie.
It's a fair point, isn't it, that the opposition leader is, you know, $100,000 behind, and when you take out the tax, etc., what are you talking about? $4,000 a month when you're already bringing home 20 or 25? Does it make a hell of a lot of difference? Probably not. But it's certainly the wrong way to think about the life. But if you were that way inclined, yeah, you might want to stay in opposition to do that. I remember back in the late 80s, when in New South Wales, when Neville Wran was the premier, he handed over to Barry Unsworth, and they were defeated by Nick Greiner and the Liberal, who got into power and changed a lot of things. And it was Bob Carr at the time agreed to become the opposition leader for the New South Wales Labor Party, and we all know what happened with Bob Carr later on, etc. But Bob Carr became the most successful premier in New South Wales before one day just giving it up and walking away. But what he did was, when he got that job as the opposition leader, he said to them, you must elect me and give me 2 terms to win back government. Don't throw me out after 1 term. We need 2 terms to do this. And he stuck to those guns, and in 2 terms he won, and he was back in office in 1996. You don't see that today. And I'm not saying that I particularly admire Bob Carr's lots of things that we know, and lots of things that we don't behind the scenes that don't impress me. But it was his political strategy and nous. And the other interesting thing about Bob Carr is that he began his career as a journalist. He was a political journalist, and many journalists become politicians for whatever reason. And one would assume it's because that they are aware of the processes, they know the right people, they know how the system works, and they get involved. Most of those, though, come from the mainstream, whether they be mainstream radio, mainstream ABC, stuff like that, not necessarily out of the independent space. But of course, all these things will change, and there will be a new dynamic there. The hardest thing is, I suppose, from us is, where are the young 25 to 35s doing what we do? There was that terrific lady that we played on the show yesterday, and people have identified her and reached out to her. But it'll be interesting to see if we can create a dialogue and follow her work, and maybe she follows ours, and we get her on the show and work things out, because we have to expand. we have to develop, we have to do new things and new ideas, and we have to reach new audiences. We can't continue to talk in a silo expecting anything to change. If you keep doing the same thing over and over again, you've just defined insanity. If you're expecting a different result, so that all plays into that point. So it's one thing to build, one thing to do, one thing to be consistent, but we also have to come up and innovate. Which is very important. And as that governor of Indiana said, merit, excellence, and innovation. And that's what we're talking about. So we respond to that. They're the things that we look forward to. And diversity, equity, and inclusion are simply excuses for ordinariness and the cultural Marxists to get their way. And that doesn't serve anyone in the long term. It's a program of favoritism to support and to push people where you need to make people feel good, and it will ultimately die. There is never and has never been a successful communist government that has made anything better. It is just a regime of power for a period in history before it is overturned, and that's the end of it.
I think Labour or DEI is a racist policy. No one ever talks about that. We're not allowed to talk about that. DEI is a racist policy. I will say it over and over again. DEI is a racist policy, right? I think the Labour government, with the help from the Liberals, are fixing, in an American term, they're fixing to be dictators, to stay in power. You know, they were all jumping around saying Trump was going to be a dictator. I think Anthony Albanese is fixing to be Australia's dictator. That's why he goes to China, and he gets tips, as Dan Andrews does, from their friend Xi Jinping or others in the Chinese Communist Party. Dan Andrews is in business on St Kilda Road with one of his Chinese counterparts when he was state premier. I believe he is still state premier, and Jacinta Allen is his marionette puppet. And, that we're never going to get rid of these people. And even in the worst case scenario, if we got rid of these people, we get someone from the Liberal Party who's the Uni Party who's the same. And he'll probably keep pulling the strings. I remember in the 90s, you mentioned the 90s, this country was pretty great. I came here in the early 90s and it was amazing. It reminded me, and I said many times, it felt like the UK in the 70s, a young country. You could start a business, you could do anything you wanted to, and you could be successful. That's all gone. The only downside that I saw in the 90s, which was interesting and could be related to what we're going through now, is that I was warned by my Australian boyfriend at the time that the Victorian police force was very corrupt, that they brought this English guy in to run the Victorian police force to clean up the corruption. And then it was discovered that he himself was corrupt. So that's really telling as well about the monarchy and being the Commonwealth and whatever, that a British senior police officer was brought to Victoria to clean us up, because there was so much corruption. And so all of these people would have been put in place now for this time in history so that they could do the things that they're doing to us. And we have to fix this place. We have to fix this country. And I know we report on a lot of negative things that are happening, and they seem negative and they're newsworthy and whatever. But let me just say to the people watching Unchained, I'm never going to give up till my last breath. They can run me down with a bus like they did that woman who was on the Epstein traffic list. They can take me out. I know when I announced that I was running with Gap for the Senate, there was a drive-by shooting and there are still 2 bullet holes in my garage door. 2 bullet holes. They're still there. I've had the police come out, and they are 44s or something. Like, they know from the size what kind of bullets they are. One of them ricocheted off the corner of my Land Rover that was in the garage, and there's a little nick off the back of the Land Rover as well. I don't know when it was done. I didn't hear them. We know they use silencers to kill animals, which is illegal, unlawful. This place is run very unlawfully. Australia's become the Wild West. I don't know how long it's going to take to clean it up, or what it's going to take, whether it's going to be a sexual scandal, a paedophilic scandal, a corruption scandal, a money scandal. But just quickly going back to what you said about that young woman, and I'm not saying it will be that young woman, but I think it's very important, as we're quite knowledgeable, but we are old farts, that we get young people talking about what young people think about and what bothers them, and trying to alert their demographic to what's going on. So my suggestion, and I'm just saying to Jason now for the first time, because you guys are watching our post-production, my suggestion is we very, very strongly consider the Daily Australian 2.0, which we're the editors-in-chief of that, right? And we talk to them, and we get 2 young people, ideally a male and a female, I don't care what demographic they are, religiously, culturally, skin color wise, gay, straight. I don't care. If you guys have got any recommendations for the Daily Australian 2.0, let's get 2 young people on there with the same messaging of truth, accountability, and transparency. And let's see if we can reach that demographic of young people who weren't formerly Neighbours fans and know me as Sarah, and who don't know about you from TNT and probably don't even know that TNT existed, right? To speak to what matters to them. This is something my 20-year-old daughter said to me time and time again when she came to my speeches. There are hundreds of people here, Mum, but they're all 40s, 30s and 40s and up. There's no really young people. So I think that would be really exciting. We can extend this brand, right? And we can reach as many people as possible because, as we've said before, it's their future, not ours. You know, we had our lives, and in the 90s and the noughties, my life was pretty good. It's gone to shit now. I've got nothing but my opinions, but which is why it's so important to be a subscriber. So thank you. Because they've done everything they can to crush us, to flatten us. You know, they've stopped me. They've actively stopped me and threatened me from going into politics. There's bullet holes in the door. I'll take pictures and I'll show you. We can flash them in the show on Monday. They don't want voices that make sense being heard because that doesn't fit this horrible, evil agenda.
Yeah, no, well said. Well, that's very exciting. It's a great idea. And this is a lot of thinking out loud on camera for our paid subscribers. And thanks, everyone, for watching. I just maintain that for mine, it is always about the North Star. You don't go through what we've gone through and put up with what we have for so long to not come out on the other side and make it better. Whenever I've run in various different guises in politics, it was to get better off for everyone, not just for the few and select. And I could never understand why it was that the system, all it wants to do is squash you, and to think that it's representing a system, a power system that is only going backwards and is an ultimate negative. But this is the frame of mind. So I am fascinated by what we're seeing in terms of the Trump thing. That's the only person I've ever seen in history capable of changing narratives in real time by doing some crazy stuff like we've seen with the Epstein stuff. And that encourages me more than it discourages me, because I realize just how powerful and how creative and brilliant you have to be able to shift these things that we know that we've been trying for years and years and years, and we're still struggling to get traction. But it's not a fight that we're going to give up on, or a fight that we expect to lose. It will change in time. So that's where I come from with all of this. There has to be a better outcome for all of us. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in for TDA Unchained number 3. Have a great week, and we'll see you all on Monday.